I think this is just like a really interesting time. And I think kind of coincidental, but I think it's like a really interesting time for this game to come out. This game is like about like a big election thing, and then, it's right around election season, so that's all neat and cool. Yeah, yeah, no, I don't like this anymore, guys. I don't want to play this game anymore. Alright, so, hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Metaphor ReFantazio? I'm not sure. I will probably be flip-flopping on that throughout the video. But we're going to be talking about the new Atlus game, Metaphor. I'll just call it Metaphor, why not? And yeah, so, little bit of background real quick. I enjoy me my Atlus games. Obviously, I released a video about Persona 3 Reload earlier this year. I've played all of the Persona 5s. I've played SMT 5, the original one, and that's pretty much it. But I like them a lot, and I would like to be playing more. So, yeah. Let's just get right into talking about this game, and just to set the stage a little bit, because this is a big fantasy world, so there's kind of some stage to be set here. So, first of all, this game is set in the United Kingdom of Euchronia, and it houses a number of races, or tribes as they're called in the game, as well as a bunch of fantasy creatures and these like horrific abominations that are an affront to God, that are called humans. I wonder if that's a metaphor for anything. Maybe. The nation is, like, plagued with racism. Like, there's, like, a lot of overt racism in this game. And I appreciate my race metaphors not being subtle. So, that's nice. And it's wrought with all sorts of turmoil, and the church is, vying for power over the state. All sorts of not great stuff. And that's when the protagonist steps in. He's an elder boy, which is one of the races, and is one of the races that they're, like, super duper extra racist against. He's just a regular guy. Whole thing. And his fairy companion, Gallica, and they have been tasked with saving the prince, who was cursed into a fatal coma, and this all starts shortly after the assassination of the king at the hands of Louis Guillaume, who was the guy who actually casted the curse on the prince, and the kingdom at large, including him, has presumed the prince dead. So there's that. And while they're on mission to try and get close to and confront him for revenge, because killing the caster is the simplest and most straightforward way to break the curse, the late king utilizes his nearly almighty magic, the royal magic, to incite a competition for the throne, as he believed the prince was dead, and that was his only heir. So rather than hand over the throne essentially to the church, he wants to give the power to the people, and so after a set time, the royal magic will read the hearts of everyone in the nation and deem the winner, who will be granted the throne and reign over the royal magic. An issue arises in the attempt on Luis's life because of this, in that anyone who's in the top 20 in the running for this election can't be killed. The royal magic will just kill the attempted perpetrator. So the protagonist and his growing party must now enter the race to try and get close to Luis to try and solve the spell themselves, or win the race and put an end to this all. So, first thing to mention, this game's aesthetic is phenomenal. Like, it looks lovely, and it's definitely a bit more out there in the vibes compared to, like, the Persona games. But I like it a lot. I like the aesthetic a lot. I think there's a lot of neat little, like, texturing details. Like, I love how they do shadows with these little, like, hash mark things here. It's just a lot of, like, nice stuff. And the UI, obviously, it's an Atlus game. If you know anything about Atlus games, it's that their UI is phenomenal. Like, just all the time for no goddamn reason, and apparently it really sucks to do. But it looks great. This is awesome. I just like looking at these menus. They're so pretty and so fun. And the, like, official render, like, profile art that you see when, like, characters are talking, the 2D art here, is gorgeous. Like, oh my god. Like, it's just so pretty and it looks so nice. It's great. And in general, this game just has, like, really strong character design, and as well, like, just, like, the monsters, they kind of go all over the place. they really are in it sometimes with their monster design. They pull a lot from the painter Hieronymus Bosch, and that sure does lead to things like this, but okay. It does suffer from, I don't even know what to call this, but I personally have referring to it in my head as Fire Emblem Three Houses ass scenery, where, like, the backgrounds, especially for, like, smaller conversations, will sometimes just, like, be, like, out in a random ass field, and it's just kind of like, you know, like, it doesn't really detract from anything, but it does sometimes get a little distracting. But aside from that, the gameplay is, like, phenomenal. Like, it's just, like, really just, like, fantastic RPG design here. The gameplay feels so nice. The UI, UX elements all add in to make it feel really, really good. It's just so cool. And there's a lot of little additional mechanics that are thrown in, like there's positioning stuff, which is pulled from a couple of previous Atlus entries. There's the press turn system, which is brought in from Shin Megami Tensei. And obviously, like, kind of the staple of this game is the archetype system, which is essentially just the class system, but with some extra layers to it. And I really like the archetypes. I think it's really interesting. I think they're neat. I just think it's all around just a good class system. I like that all the classes have at least one, like, evolved version. I just think it's all pretty good stuff, you know? There's definitely some tweaks. Like, I definitely think it felt a little awkward that evolved versions of an archetype don't have the skills from the previous version. Like, I can understand for, like, balancing reasons, but, like, sometimes it's like this next class gets exclusively just better versions of the previous one. What is the point of gatekeeping those? So, just a little, like, nitpicky. It's not necessarily an issue, it's more just a nitpick. And one of my biggest issues with, like, gameplay combat-wise is that there's this really interesting like action combat thing where when you are like in a dungeon or whatever, you can swing your sword or whatever weapon you're equipped with, and you can actively like be doing damage to enemies, and when they're low enough level, you can just straight up kill them in the overworld. And it's really cool conceptually, but in practice it felt kind of like it was missing depth to it, I think is the best way to put it. Like, it's something that feels like it very easily could be improved to be just a really awesome addition, because I think it's really neat and I really like the idea of this, but like the Colosseum, which is completely optional, has like 2 or 3 challenges, and those are like the only instances that like really like engage with this like system and these mechanics of this like action centered part. So I hope that if we do get another Metaphor game or whatever, ReFantazio game, I hope that they like flesh that out more. I think that's the biggest area that I think needs improvement. But in general, dungeons were great. I really liked them. I think there was a lot of variety in like the gameplay loop of the dungeons. Like, they weren't all like cookie cutter, even if they all frankly kind of just look like fantasy like dungeon settings. In terms of like the gameplay and the story setting for these dungeons, they're all like really varied. Like there's like, obviously there's like more traditional dungeon, but then there's also like one of the main dungeons is just like a stealth section, which questionable on its quality, but it's like really interesting and it's really neat, and I like that a lot. It feels a lot less monotonous than, say, the dungeons in Persona 5, which all kind of blend together in terms of the gameplay loop. Kind of have the opposite thing of like, gameplay wise they kind of all feel identical, but visually they're very different. And just another thing, I really love the traveling around, because you get to just travel around the whole continent, and it's a whole exploration of this whole nation, which makes sense because you're in the running for the king, so it makes sense to be trying to like see the whole kingdom, you know? And I think it's nice to get to see a bunch of cities, like multiple, even if some of them are kind of small and a bit more barren. But overall, I liked them. As well, the traveling mechanic, it generally just like plays really well into the passing of days, the time system that is used in the Persona games that is brought into this. And it really makes that traveling aspect, which, you know, takes your time in-game, it makes it feel much more strategic. It makes it feel much more like a core part of the world and the story and the gameplay loop. It isn't just like, oh, you click this thing on the map and you're there now. And finally, I think the follower system, which is essentially just the social links from the Persona games, is generally a lot more rewarding. I think they were a lot better with the rewards of these followers. And I also just liked them a lot, like writing-wise, character-wise. I think they were all just like really strong. So, yeah. And speaking of characters, this game just all around has like an incredible cast of characters, writing-wise. I think it's just fantastic. In particular, the main party, like, phenomenal. Like, this is probably my favorite Atlus party, like, ever. Like, Gallica, who is your little fairy guide, is, like, pretty much the only member of your party that I'm, like, kind of, like, whatever on. But, like, then you have Stroll, who's the first party member to join you, and he's very much your staunchest ally. He really like seeks to redeem himself after a tragedy befell his family and his people, and he really wants to bring kind of seeks this like idealized version. To nobility, then we have Hulkenberg, who is a knight, and she's brought into the fold after the death of her early game Jagan, and she is actually revealed to be the knight that was guarding the prince on the night that he was cursed, and so she holds a lot of weight in this mission to save him. And then finally, for this base party, we have Heisme, who is a man on the run and is a assassin for the military, essentially, or formerly was. And he really just seeks to find a less cruel world in honor of his late son, and he's framed for murder because of racism reasons. So, yeah. And then we also have Nuris, who is the pilot and engineer of your Gauntlet Runner, and I can best describe him as just so autistic for Gauntlet Runners, but I love him, and he does have some genuine depth and moments. And then finally we have the antagonist, Luis Guiburn, and he's just a really fucking good antagonist. He really just like pushes your buttons as a player, and he just feels smart and cunning, and he really just like feels like he's one step ahead of you at all times, which obviously it's like all scripted and shit's like no shit, he's one step ahead of you, but like it really feels it. And he's just a really cool character, and every time he's on screen I'm like, ah, fuck yeah, and or I'm like, oh fuck, you know how it is. And really my biggest character issue is, again, kind of nitpicky, but it's that the protagonist, who admittedly has more agency than previous Atlus protagonists, at least that I've known, where like he can even like actually talk, but it just kind of felt weird that he didn't have a set name, and so voiced lines obviously have to awkwardly dance around it. But like, he could have just had his canon name, which is Will, you know, like the will of the people. Very, very, very funny, very clever. But like, no, you pick his name still, and it just feels weird because the game also asks what you, the player, what your name is earlier. So it's like, he's explicitly not a self-insert for the player. Just let him be his own character then. Also, all around phenomenal voice cast, like, oh my god. Like, just fantastic all the way down. But some particular highlights, we have Felipe Spall as Heisme. He's so good, oh my god. Fantastic voice actor, and is apparently like not really in anything else, which is crazy. We have Christina Atherton as Hulkenberg. She's great, and she's around for a lot of the game, so like she really carries that shit. We have David Monteith as Nuris. He's, again, just fantastic. I wish I had more specifics to say, but like, they're just really good, dude. They're just really good. We have Greg Chun as Moore, and also the narrator, because there's a narrator that narrates stuff and events, and like when you arrive at locations. Then we have Lindsay Morel as Brigitte. We have Jamie Newell as Sanctifex Forden. Joseph Tweedale as Luis. He's so good, man. Oh my god. He's so good. He's so good. I just love listening to his voice. We have Matthew Whitchurch as Basilio. I just like him. I just like his voice. I think it's a fun choice because Basilio is this really big guy, and then he generally just has this very jovial, childlike voice. Not weird childlike, but like childlike in spirit. And it's great. I also just love Basilio. And then, finally, we have the MVP of Stuart Clark as Stroll. Stroll's voice is fantastic. He does such a good job. I, again, really wish I had more specifics to say on it, but he's just so good at it. Oh my god. And as well, the soundtrack is fantastic. It can be a bit generic fantasy at bits, but it's really good, and my god is that regular battle theme fucking crazy. And now we're on to the spoilers section. Obviously, you know how spoilers work for YouTube videos. You can skip to the time that is on the screen. There will also be like chapters for the video, so you can just skip the spoilers. I will see you after that if you want to avoid them. But as you progress the story, you do go on to recruit 3 more party members. You get Juna, who's another spy trying to kill Luis, but she goes about it a very different way in that she's invaded his closest circle. She is like his closest like thing to a companion. And I don't know, I like her, but I also just don't really have anything to say about her. I don't know what, but I do like her, I swear. And then you have Yufa, who is a priestess on the island of the Mystari, and they kind of follow this wholly different pagan religion, which is a whole other can of worms. And it has its own traditions, which one of those includes sacrifice of the priestess to the dragon god for peace, which the party ends up stopping for reasons, which again, whole can of worms I just don't want to get into. And then Yufa, essentially her arc ends up being having to learn to live for her people rather than dying for them. And I really like that. I like that. I don't know. And she's also essentially the canon romance for the protagonist. He doesn't really act much on it, but she is the only character that you have any sort of like follower conversation with where she is like actually like actively interested in you. So do with that what you will. And then finally we have Basilio, who was a follower of Luis with his brother Del, but over the course of the story he is slowly dissuaded from this belief of the rule of and for the strong. He grows to believe and understand that the weak should be cared for by the strong, and that's kind of the point of society, you know? And then when his brother is killed, he finally joins your efforts. The endgame of this story has a lot of really cool moments. I think there's some stuff that like kind of feels a bit like, I don't know why this is happening right now exactly, but cool? Question mark? But I fucking loved the Luis assassination sequence. It just such a tense moment, and like cool ass cutscene shooting that fucking harpoon through his heart. But also the moment when you're on the roof after the quote unquote assassination and then he walks up holding said weapon, just like real big like oh shit, oh no type of moment. Really just great stuff. Oh my god. And then there's the whole sequence that reveals that the protagonist is actually some like mental projection of the prince, which I barely understood while I was playing it, and I'm definitely not going to try and explain further in detail here, so just go with that. But essentially the prince is the protagonist, but like separated from his physical body. And also he doesn't have his memories, which is why we don't find this information out until like the end of the game. Because of course he doesn't have his memories. This is, of course. And that the ending was good, but had some generic fantasy RPG moments to it. But I really liked the fight with Mor/the King, aka your dad, which it wasn't like a hard fight, but it really affirmed a lot of the themes of the games. One of them being that like fantasy is in its own way a real thing and has real world like effects and stakes to it. Like fantasy fiction, it matters despite the fact that it is fiction. which, like, in a lot of ways is, like, reminiscent of Danganronpa V3, which I hate that I'm making that comparison in this video, because I generally don't want to talk about that time in my life when I was really into Danganronpa, but, like, whatever. And then I really love the little epilogue bit. It's just, like, a nice little, like, you get to catch up with essentially any, like, remotely relevant character that's not dead, and what they've been up to in the past year while the protagonist has been king. And yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. I like this story. I like this game. I like these characters. And yeah, that's pretty much it for my thoughts on Metaphor ReFantazio. I really liked it. I liked it a lot. It was very much, like I kind of was joking about at the end of the Astrobot video, it came out and I immediately dropped both games that I was actively in the middle of playing, Ghost of Tsushima and The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I still have not touched either of them since then. So hopefully one of those two will be the next game I play before the end of the year, before I do my year-end wrap video thing. But yeah, I enjoyed this game a lot. I hope you get the opportunity to play it. I think it's great, genuinely. Just an awesome game all around. And yeah, that's it for this video. I will see you next time. But until then, bye!